Today we have Adam Sudd. I'm really excited for you guys to hear Adam's story. He has an incredible story, very inspiring. He's a good friend of mine, lives very close. We work out together. I know how fit he is. He's going to tell you about that. But he also does a lot of work in the addiction community. He's a public speaker, speaks all over the United States. So Adam, it's really great to have you here.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that, Robbie. I'm really glad to be here.
So Adam, why don't we start at the top here? Tell us, you have an incredible story here about overcoming diabetes, high blood pressure, high cholesterol, and a lot of sort of like difficult, like no self-worth. That's what you've talked about in the past. So let's start at the very beginning. Go back to the time when you first recognized there was a problem.
Okay. So, I'm a child of the 80s. So like a lot of kids, when I was about 12 years old, I was diagnosed with ADD. And I was put on, at the time it was Ritalin. That was the big drug then. That was what all the doctors were telling their parents to do. And that's what all the teachers were wanting the parents of kids who were having trouble in school to do. And so I was put on Ritalin. And the problem with medications like that, specifically mind-altering, mood-altering medications, and when you're diagnosing a young child, is that they're not able to understand anything other than this simple fact. You don't fit into the world, and this pill will fix you. And that, I really believe that is what that created a cycle for a lot of my life through puberty and growing up, to where if there was something that I didn't like about myself, or that the world seemed to not agree with about me, I would look for an outside source to fix it. And when I got into high school, this is when, sexual maturity started to happen. I really started to care about the way people looked at me. And I didn't have a very good relationship with myself. I didn't have a good self-image. Something that I like to let everyone know, because I think it's important to understand, is that I had a difficult relationship with my father growing up. He lost his father to colon cancer when he was very young. And I believe that as a result of that trauma, it really cut him off emotionally. And as a result of losing someone he was very close with and someone that meant a lot to him, people that he loves, people that he's very close with, when he sees them engaging in lifestyle behavior that threatens his ability to keep them in his life, threatens their health, he becomes hypercritical, because that's the only way he can say, I'm afraid that what you're doing is going to harm you and that I'm going to lose you. And so from a very young age, when I would eat or want to eat junk food, I got criticized. And I sort of became a closet eater at a young age. And I wasn't really overweight, but but because I was eating these foods, I thought there was something wrong with me. So I didn't like myself physically.
And what types of foods were you eating at that time?
Well, we weren't allowed to have like packaged junk food in the house, but in the mornings, a lot of times my mom would make cinnamon rolls for breakfast, and I was allowed to have one. And I would have one, and then when on my way to school or before school, I would either grab one, run into my room, and eat it in the closet, literally, or I would grab a few and put them in my backpack and take them with me. Basically, I was hiding my behavior because I felt that if my parents saw me doing this, they wouldn't accept me, and that they would see that there was something wrong with me. And I also, when I got into high school, started to reach, maturity. I feel that for me, I looked to my dad as the example of what I needed to be in order to be a successful man. And he's a very type A personality. He's a very successful person, and I'm not a type A. And so I had a hard relationship with him, and I had a difficult time finding out who I was as an individual. But I remember very clearly this one weekend, I was a sophomore in high school, and they had put me on Adderall at this point because Adderall had become the new medication. A friend of mine called me. It was the weekend. He said, "Are you coming out to the party tonight?" And I told him that I couldn't because I had a lot of homework. There was some project that needed to be done, and I couldn't take the time off. And he said, "Well, don't you take Adderall?" And I replied to him, I said, "Yeah, I do." And he told me that if I just take more of it, that I'll be able to stay up all night long and get all my work done. So why don't I come to the party tonight, and then Sunday night, just take all the Adderall I need to and get my work done. Well, in my mind, I thought, well, if this is going to keep me up all night, why don't I take it at the party also? So I took it that night, and I got to tell you, it was a real surreal feeling. I mean, I absolutely loved it because it is methamphetamine. It is simply an amphetamine salt. We're talking about a substance that is chemically identical to street meth. The only difference is that it isn't cut with really destructive, horrible things. And it made me a type A personality, gave me endless energy, and it made me not want to eat. So I thought, here it was. Here's my solution to all my problems. I could control the way that I looked physically. I could become the type A personality that I thought I needed to be accepted by my peers, be accepted by my parents. And, it was perfect. And I became very, very addicted very quickly. All the way through high school, I was using it and abusing it. When I got into college, it really got out of hand because, like with any supernormal stimuli, anyone who reads Doug Lyle's work, we know that when you're constantly using a substance that is an experience that is outside the bounds of normal experience, the brain reacts by defending itself, and that's how you end up going through the process of neuroadaptation or habituation. And I ended up very addicted to where I was doctor shopping, which is where you have multiple doctors prescribing the same medication without knowing about each other. I was forging prescriptions. I was skipping my classes because at this point, my school didn't matter anymore. I just wanted to be on the drug. And I ended up dropping out of school because I got a job in the industry that I was studying. And I said, all right, well, I'll just go start working. But I knew the real reason was I was now going to have money to continue buying more drugs. And I was going to be back in my hometown where I knew all my dealers were.
So at this point, it sounds like the only drug that you were addicted to was Adderall. And you saw that it had all these incredible benefits for you being able to control the way you looked and your eating behavior and your, turning you into this type A personality. So how often were you using Adderall, and, what was going on in your head? Were you aware of the fact that this was happening, or was this all kind of subconscious?
Oh, I absolutely was aware that I was addicted. But the thing is, it's funny because I could tell myself in my head, oh, I'm an addict. I'm clearly, the behaviors that I'm doing are 100% textbook addict behavior. I could tell myself that in my own head, but I could never say it out loud. I could never say out loud that I'm an addict, because there's an interesting thing that happens when you say something in your head. Your ears actually don't hear anything. There's no sound. Nothing's actually being said. So your brain processes it differently. When you say something out loud, you actually process it through the frontal lobe, which is where the rational thought and all that takes place. And I could never allow myself to hear those words. And it got to the point where, I'll explain it to you this way. The average prescription dosage is somewhere between 20 to 40 milligrams a day. After I dropped out of school, after I, became such a drug addict that I had no work anymore, I was living in an apartment where I basically lived like a hoarder. I had my drug wasn't working for me. I was taking insane amounts of it. The average, like I said, the average amount is 20 to 40 milligrams a day. I was taking 450 milligrams a day. Wow. The problem is when you're addicted to something that severely for so long, and specifically Adderall, which is an amphetamine, it destroys your adrenal glands and your metabolism. So what normally used to make me not want to eat, now just made me have these insane compulsive behaviors. And I found that a great substitute for feeling really for feeling really bad about yourself is fast food. And I became incredibly addicted to junk food. And I'll tell you what my normal day would be. I would wake up, I would go to a place called Torchy's Tacos. They make breakfast tacos, which are like breakfast burritos, but they're smaller. And I would get 6 breakfast tacos, 3 potato, egg, and cheese, and 3 jalapeno sausage, egg, and cheese, and a large Coke. For my first lunch, I would go to McDonald's, get a supersized double quarter pounder meal with an extra double quarter pounder because one wasn't enough. For my second lunch, I would go to a place called Whataburger, get the honey barbecue chicken strip sandwich with extra large fries, extra large drink, which was a soda. For my first dinner, I would either go back to McDonald's for the same 2 double quarter pounder supersized meal thing, or an entire large Papa John's pizza with sausage on it. And then at somewhere around 3 a.m., I would go back to Whataburger and get these breakfast on a bun sausage egg sandwiches, 4 of them with a large soda. And I was drinking somewhere around 9 to 12 sodas a day.
Now, was there anybody else in your life at the time that knew that you were eating this way? Or were you almost, eating in a closet, meaning that you were eating these foods and then you wouldn't tell anybody else about it?
Oh yeah, I mean, I ate in my apartment. I basically lived in my apartment, and when I tell you that my apartment looked like something from that show Hoarders, I mean that 100%. Except it wasn't like holding on to newspapers and things like that. It was just filth. It was, fast food trash and empty pizza boxes and empty soda cans, and it was really. I slept on my couch, and there was this pathway in between the trash that led to my front door and led to my bathroom, and that's how I walked there. And no one was allowed in it, and I wasn't talking to anyone. My dad was aware that I was gaining all this weight and was aware that there was something going on. I was losing all my money. He had, I'm very fortunate to, I grew up in a situation where I didn't have to want for a lot of things. And my dad gave me control of my inheritance, so to speak, and I spent it all on drugs. And he cut me off. He said, Adam, I don't know what's going on with you, but your money's gone. You gained all this weight. If there's something wrong, if you have a problem, just, ask for it. My parents were very clear, even though I absolutely blamed them and the universe for all my problems. They were very clear that I don't have to be ashamed of anything. If I ever need help, I can ask for it. And, I got to the point to where I was 320 pounds and I was, a month away from living on the street. And my dad, who is a part of Whole Foods Market, this was back in 2007, gave me an opportunity. He never let an opportunity to help his son pass him by. They were starting this new program with a company called Engine 2, with this crazy plant-eating family called the Esselstyns. And he called me and he said, Adam, I want you to go to this. It's only available to Whole Foods team members, but if I really want you to go and I can get you in. And I went and met with Rip, and they agreed to let me come. And to be honest, the only reason I went was if I did, my father would continue to support me. It wasn't about wanting any help. It was a completely selfish reason. I went, I was a drug addict at the immersion, and I was using it at the immersion. I was high the entire time, but I went to every lecture and I listened to everything. And I remember that there was a motivational speaker there that night named Dick Beardsley, who is he's a lifelong marathoner. He held world records in marathoning. And he spoke about how after his career, he suffered this series of really horrific accidents and got addicted to pain pills. And something about the way he spoke about it connected with me. And I remember thinking very vividly, let me go up to this guy and have him be the person that I finally admit to someone that I'm an addict. And I was so close, but I didn't do it. And for the next 3 years, I continued to suffer in silence in my apartment until finally my parents cut me off again. And I was 30 years old. I don't remember. I don't believe that I actually was trying to kill myself this night, but I took far more Adderall than I've ever taken before. It was upwards of 600 milligrams that day. I took a bunch of pain pills, and I remember the feeling of my heart racing, getting very dizzy, getting very nauseous, throwing up, and knowing I was about to have an overdose. And there is this moment when I realized that as an addict, I understand that there's nothing that anyone could have said to me to make me want to change except for myself. But I also know that all the people that love me, my parents, my brother, my sister, my mom, they'll never know that. They'll never understand it. And they'll carry this pain with them for the rest of their life, that thinking that there's something they could have said. And I'd never been so scared in my entire life. And I woke up a few hours later on the floor in my apartment, surrounded by my disease, surrounded by empty pill bottles, surrounded by fast food garbage. And I picked up the phone and I called my parents. And all I said was, I need help. And they didn't ask any questions. They just said, don't worry, we'll take care of it. And in 2 weeks, I checked into to rehab in Tucson, Arizona. And these were parents that I treated like an ATM machine. And to be more specific, these were actual thoughts that I had. This is how I felt about my parents. And this speaks to the disease. I remember nights when I'd be laying in my apartment thinking I've wasted my life. I'm going to die from my addiction. I'm overweight. No one, who's going to like me? I hate myself. I don't want to live anymore. Never going to make anything of myself, but at least when my parents die, I'll get their money. That's how I felt about them. That's how I treated them. Of course I loved them, but that's how I treated them. And even though I gave them, every reason in the world to never have anything to do with me, they never gave up on me. And when I needed help, it wasn't, well, you have to do this, or it was, don't worry, we're going to take care of it.
Adam, this is like incredibly powerful. Thank you so much for sharing this so far. So take us through this. You're at rehab. You're 30 years old at this point. Have you already been diagnosed with diabetes or high blood pressure or high cholesterol at this point?
Day one of rehab.
Okay, day one of rehab. So now you get all these other diagnoses, and you know internally that you're a food addict and you're a drug addict on top of these new diagnoses. Yes. So what goes through your head, and how do you move forward at that point?
Well, here's the thing. Since attending the Esselstyn Engine 2 immersion, I knew 100% that the medical diagnoses that I had received, the type 2 diabetes, my blood sugar was almost 400, the high cholesterol, my blood pressure was so high that for the first week of rehab, I had to have my blood pressure and heart rate monitored every morning before I was allowed to go to my therapy groups. All of this situation, my obesity, the fact that I was over 320 pounds, was my fault. I could not blame any of this on my genes. And I couldn't deny it either. There was a number on a page. There it was. And I had to accept my situation in life. I had to take responsibility for the first time in my life. I was there with plans of completely denying my drug addiction, completely denying my depression. And, the thing is, what are they going to do? I can't prick my finger and measure how depressed I am that day. I can't prick my finger and measure how much of an addict I am that day. There's no chartable way to register where I am in terms of recovery. And that made it very difficult for me. But with the diagnoses, the diabetes, the high blood pressure, the high cholesterol, there it was. And it gave me something to fight. And I remember thinking this very clearly, that since I'm the problem, I get to be the solution. And I said, I'm going to go 100% plant-based, and that is going to be my recovery. I'm going to reverse these diseases. And as a result of that, I am going to be sober, because I can't do that if I'm using my drug. In rehab, you don't have any control over your food. It's a cafeteria situation. They had a very sort of, low rent type of salad bar, basically. And this is someone who is accustomed to eating, 6 burgers a day, and I'm a 7th generation Texan. Basically, barbecue sauce was part of my DNA. And so I wasn't able to go 100% plant-based in rehab. But after that, my treatment coordinators determined that I needed to go into sober living. And I picked this place in Santa Monica, and it advertised that it had this really, really healthy kitchen environment. And I thought, all right, this is where it's going to happen. And I check into the sober living, I walk into the kitchen, I look in the cabinets, and I swear to you, it was like every single commercial from a Nickelodeon cartoon show that you ever saw in the 90s. It was Eggo waffles, microwavable pizzas, Fruity Pebbles, sodas, Doritos, Oreos, all the dairy and cheese you could ever want, white bread. I mean, there was nothing green in this entire place. And I thought to myself, I had this thought. I remember thinking that people may leave this place, this supposed place of healing. They may leave sober living 3 months down the road, which is the typical length of stay, 10 months down the road, a year down the road. They may leave sober, but nobody has the opportunity to leave here healthier. Mm-hmm. And I talked to the sober living manager, and I said, listen, I'm a type 2 diabetic. I have high blood pressure, high cholesterol. I'm on 8 medications. I can't eat any of these foods. And I signed a contract with you that said that you have to provide food for me. So what are we going to do about it? And my house manager, who was not the person who was making the decisions on the food, just he was there managing the house, said, you know what? I'm so glad you're saying this, because I've been wanting someone to say that food matters. What can I do? Tell me what you need and I'll get it for you, and I'll make sure you have it every day in the kitchen. And I looked at him and I said, listen, I've never done this before. I don't really know what I'm supposed to be eating, but I know what I like. I like oatmeal in the morning. And then for lunch and dinner, I know I like black beans, broccoli, and I like all kinds of fruit. So if you can give me those things, that'll be great. And that's what I ate every single day for 10 months. And it was incredibly difficult until I remember the first week I was crying every day. It was football season. I'm in a house full of 20-something-year-old guys. Everyone's eating pizza every weekend, because every weekend is pizza night. They're watching football. They're drinking sodas. They look happy. They look healthy. And then I read a book by Doug Lisle called The Pleasure Trap. And it explained to me one thing that I believe is the invariable truth to all lifestyle change and recovery, that you have to be comfortable being uncomfortable.
Say that again. Say that again. This is a really important point.
You have to be comfortable being uncomfortable. There's a biological problem that I had created in my body that allowed me to believe that when I did the wrong thing, it was right because it felt right. And that when I do the right thing, it felt wrong. It's this pleasure trap that most people on the standard American diet don't know that they put themselves in. And in order to change, I had to wake up every day, realize that I'm not going to enjoy the foods right now, because I didn't know it. I didn't have someone explain to me how to cook everything. I just knew that these things I could tolerate, and so I was going to eat it. But if I could be comfortable being uncomfortable, my chances for success are incredibly high. If I'm not willing to do that, I might as well not even try.
So this is actually really important, because it sounds to me like this was the first time in your entire life when you walked up to the house manager and you said, hey, I'm trying to do something that's good for me. And I want to be able to start, you were recognizing a problem and you're saying, hey, let's work together so that we can solve this problem. At
Absolutely.
Which point you recognize that he said, okay, great. I've also been trying to make this work. Let's do it together. So how did it feel when you finally verbalized that, you were trying to create a solution?
Well, I was also this very angry, entitled, arrogant person. So I was also really happy that I was getting to start a conflict in the house. And so that was, to be honest, that was part of it. I got to start this sort of issue with the house management and all that stuff. But I'll tell you what it did do for me was that even though I may not have been aware of it consciously, every single time I got up in the morning and I prepared a meal that was about creating health and wellness in my life, that was about reversing disease, that was about making me a happier, healthier person today than the person I was the day before, that was an act of self-care. That was an act of self-love. That was an affirmation of sobriety through action. It wasn't just getting up and doing a gratitude meditation every morning, which I do, and they're very important. But it was actions that created positive change. And what I wasn't aware of was that I created an environment in that sober living for myself, where if I went to IOP, which is intensive outpatient therapy, and I went there 5 days a week for 4 hours a day, group therapy, and then an additional hour of private therapy. I had a really horrible day there where I would go and they would try to get me to accept that I was this entitled, arrogant, spoiled, angry person. And in typical angry, entitled, arrogant, spoiled fashion, throw up a finger, leave, and start walking down Santa Monica Boulevard, which is what happened a lot during the first few months. I could come home be pissed off at the universe, emotionally eat all I wanted, and at the end of the day, still only make positive physical changes. The environment that I created for myself did not allow for me to make destructive behavior and destructive choices that would affect my health in a bad way. It only allowed for me to make positive change. And within 3 months, my diabetes was completely gone. My blood sugar had gone from almost 400, and I was on the maximum dosage of metformin. I was on like 1,500 or 2,000 milligrams of metformin a day. And by the time the 3-month mark came around, I was in the 60s. And I didn't really feel very good when my blood pressure was my blood sugar was in the 60s. So I just stopped taking the medicine. And I went to my doctor at month 4. And I remember his reaction very clearly. And I now think it's actually quite hilarious. He looked at me, tested my blood sugar, it was in the 80s, like 82. And he goes, wow, this medicine's working. And he had this look on his face like he was shocked. He had no intention of this medicine actually ever working. And I looked at him and I said, well, you know, I really don't think it's the medicine. He goes, no, it's working really well. We'll cut you down to half of your dosage now. And I said, no, I'm not going to do that either. And he looked at me and he said, what do you mean? So you're saying you want to stay on medication that you don't need? I said, no, I haven't been taking the medicine for at least a month. I've been doing this plant-based diet thing, and I've been doing it since day one, and I really believe that that's why we're in the situation we're in today. And he looked at me and he said, well, that makes sense. And I remember having thoughts of wanting to be very angry with him, wanting to say, well, why didn't you mention this to me when I met with you 3 months ago when you put me on this medicine? But I have to think of my situation. Here I was, a young, angry, overweight, unhappy, depressed drug addict. Maybe that wasn't the right time for him to say, you can also do this. Maybe he was trying to protect me and say, let's at least get you on the medicine and see if we can get your blood sugar down. And then maybe a little bit further down the line, I'll bring this up to you.
So in hindsight, do you believe that if he had actually planted that seed in your head, instead of basically saying, let's do drugs, and he said, hey, let's talk about a plant-based diet, or let's talk about changing your dietary approach.
Yeah.
Do you, if you had to go back in time, would you prefer that he would have said that rather than saying, let's put you on metformin and a whole bunch of other medication?
I believe I would prefer anyone to give me all the information that they have and not just the easiest. And I don't know, you know, I'm not sure that if I hadn't attended the Engine 2 immersion, I'm not sure if I would have believed him or whatever, but I would have appreciated all the information. And if he could have shown me testimonial or shown me evidence stating that the medicine is only treating the symptoms and that this diet will reverse the disease. You can either be on the medicine for the rest of your life and have the disease, or be on the diet for the rest of your life and be disease free. I would have appreciated being able to make that choice for myself. And I think it's, if you have all of that information, I think it's only responsible. You are responsible to give all the information that you have. But I looked at him and I said, you know, it's been great, but I don't need your services anymore. And I left, and I felt so good that I came home and I thought about, why am I succeeding so well physically when I'm not progressing at all emotionally? Well, what I did was I accepted that I don't know how to live as a physical person. The way that I was living my life as a physical person was killing me. And I ended up at age 30 dying on the floor in my apartment. And I don't know any other way to live. I didn't know any other way to do this, but I received information from Rip Esselstyn and Engine 2. They told me another way to live, and they said, here's the facts, here's all the data, this is why it will work, here's why you can have confidence in it. And I tried it, and it wasn't easy, but as a result of it, my life got better. If I approach my emotional recovery the same way, maybe I'll have the same results. So I went into my IOP and I said, I'm sick and tired of fighting you guys. You're saying I'm this entitled, arrogant, spoiled, you know, angry kid. Fine. But I don't know any other way to get through life. It's the only way I know how to do it. That it's my defense mechanism. It's my way of dealing with things that are too emotionally difficult for me. I don't know any other way to do it. Why don't you just tell me what to do? Because I'm willing to try it now. And maybe I won't maybe everything you say won't work for me, but let's see what happens. And from that day on, my recovery emotionally really started to happen. And within 10 months, I lost 100 pounds. And within a year, I was off of every single medication I was put on in rehab, including the antidepressants, the mood stabilizers, the sleeping medication, on top of the blood sugar, blood pressure, high cholesterol, every single medication, the ADHD medications, all of it gone. And I looked at my recovery, and I looked at the people that I went through sober living with. And unfortunately, most people who go through sober living gain weight, their medications go up, or they go on more medications than what they started with. Now, these were people that I was in the same situation with. We were in the same house. What was the difference? My environment allowed me to make these remarkable changes. I created an environment, a plant-based environment, that only allowed me to make positive change no matter what the psychology, no matter the emotional problems. I could not harm myself physically with these foods. It's impossible. So I really believe that was the difference. And to this day, I've lost 160 pounds. I've become certified as a plant-based nutritionist and a lifestyle coach. And I developed a program where I teach plant-based nutrition as a way of allowing people in recovery to create that same kind of environment where when they're having a bad day and, they're having to deal with a lot of really difficult existential things, and they come home and they're angry at the universe and they want to self-soothe with food, fine, do it. Because you're still only going to be making positive changes with those foods you put in your body. And, I've been doing that now for a year and a half. Unfortunately, a lot of the recovery world is not too accepting of it, but we're making some changes, and so it's been good. But
so you said earlier that you lost 100 pounds in 10 months. So that's basically 10 pounds per month for 10 months solid. And then that continued, and you've now lost a total of 160 pounds.
Right.
In what time frame?
I think that I lost about 140, 130 pounds in about a year and a half. And then as a result of different fitness goals that I've had over those periods, my weight has gone up when I wanted to have more muscle on me and gone down when I wanted to do more endurance type of things. So right now I'm at 160 pounds because I was just doing marathons this year, and it'll go up because I'm trying to understand the science of building muscle on a plant-based diet, which it's totally possible. So it's just a result of the lifestyle that I want to live.
What would you say to somebody who says, I'm not going to change my eating habits, I'm just going to go to the gym more?
Well, I'll tell them exactly what I know from my own experience, that in terms of weight loss, you lose weight in the kitchen. That's where weight loss and health happens. You can get fit in the gym. That's where fitness happens. And then nobody on this planet is overweight because they eat too much. People are overweight because they eat too many calories. That's how it works. When you eat a plant-based diet with a low caloric density, you can eat almost as much as you want and still lose weight, and you're putting the most nutrient-dense foods in your body. I mean, people think that the gym is all about weight loss and weight management, when really it's about heart training and muscle training and getting fit. And unless you're in the gym 7 hours a day, lifting like crazy, you're not going to outrun your diet. It's just not going to happen. And regardless of your weight, regardless of the number on the scale, if you're eating diet of animal protein and saturated fats, doesn't matter how thin you are, you're going to end up with disease. That's just how it works. I look at these people who are, these amazingly fit, active people, but have no idea the damage that they're doing with every bite and every piece of food that's on their fork. And I used to believe that I was this cursed individual. I used to believe, why do I have to be the kid that when he eats has a burger once, every now and then, he puts on weight, and all these other people get to eat whatever they want, and they're thin and they're attractive, and how lucky are they? But now I think back and I thought, wow, how lucky am I that I have a body that was willing to show me exactly what I was doing to myself before, it was at the end of my life, and I'm fighting off cancer, or I'm fighting off heart disease, on top of, the diabetes that I wasn't even aware that I had. And, I saw firsthand that I'm not a prisoner to these diagnoses. I'm not, these medications weren't a life sentence, and that I don't have to blame my genetics, that if I make these changes, I can change my fate. And, one of the things that people like to hear when I tell my story is they want to hear me talk about how much weight I've lost, the diseases I've been able to reverse, the medications I've been able to get off of. But the most rewarding and profound thing is what I've gained. I have a relationship with my parents and a relationship with my father that I've never had before. I feel good about who I am. I wake up every morning and I'm excited for the day. I'm enthusiastic about my life, and I like the person that I am, and I'm happier and I'm healthier than I've ever been in my life. And the thing is that I realize I'm an addict. I have an addict brain, and I don't think of it as a bad thing. I was a really good drug addict. When I was a drug addict, I was so good at it that I had doctors believing whatever I told them, giving me however much medication I wanted. I would scam people. If I didn't have my medicine, my drugs, I'd never been that productive in my life. Like, I went to work and I scammed whoever I needed to scam, and I, stole from whoever I needed to steal from, and I got the drugs I needed. And I was so good at it that I was dying on the floor from an overdose. If I can switch my addiction from a destructive behavior to a constructive behavior, addiction isn't a bad thing. I am very much addicted to my lifestyle. The difference is my drug addiction kept me locked away in a filthy apartment with no life and no future. And these plants have allowed me to create a life where I am on a Skype call with Dr. Cyrus Khambatta and Robbie Barbero, and I'm talking about how people can better their lives the way that I have. My life is bigger than it's ever been. And one of the things I didn't talk about was about 2 years before I checked in, 2 years before I went into the engine tumors, and my father, who's a lifelong marathoner, suffered a stroke. And, this was a guy who ate fried chicken every Friday night, and liked to have, turkey sandwiches and steaks and barbecue. Been fit his whole life, played high school basketball, was the captain of his basketball team, ran marathons his whole life, suffered a stroke, and they have about a 2.5 hour window to get the clot out. And after that, any longer than that, you're doing permanent damage. We're all in the emergency room, waiting room, and we're approaching the 3-hour mark. And a nurse comes out to me and pulls me aside, my brother aside, and says, "It's really bad. It's cut off the circulation to about 85 to 90% of his brain. We still don't have the clot out. I'm going to give you the reality of the situation. 90 to 95% of people who suffer this type of stroke do not live 24 hours. The other remaining percentage will never walk or talk again. You need to prepare yourself for that." The nurse went back into the room, and about 10 minutes later, they came out with this look on their face, and they said, "We don't know what to tell you, but he's checking his email right now, and he's completely fine." Now, he's incredibly lucky. And if he didn't change his lifestyle, I guarantee you he would have another stroke. And, my dad and I, we didn't get, if he had died that day, I would have lost him before I could reconcile my situation with him and my relationship with him. So I almost lost my father that day, and 2 years later, he almost lost me from a drug addiction and to fast food before we could settle our differences and become close. And, I get to make the statement to him that thanks to my parents, who are not to blame for my addiction, not to blame for my obesity, not to blame for any of it, they are the reason why I was able to make the incredible changes I've made. Because of them, and because of plant-based nutrition, they never have to worry about me having another drug overdose. And because my dad is now 100% plant-based, I never have to worry about getting a call saying, "You need to get to the hospital. We don't think your father's going to live." And that's an amazing thing.
Adam, I feel like I could talk to you for days about this because there's
Yeah.
so many aspects about the psychology and the physiology that's just fascinating. But let's go back to what you said earlier. You said, I am an addict. I always have been an addict. I still am an addict, right? I have addictive personality, right? So it sounds like what you've done is you've used that to your advantage, and yet now you've changed, and you're just you're performing a different set of habits on a daily basis. So what are you addicted to now?
Well, I know Robbie knows exactly what I'm addicted to. It's sweet potatoes, cinnamon, and base camp fitness. So I wake up every morning at 4:30 a.m. and I eat about 600 calories of oatmeal with probably the same volume of cinnamon mixed into it. And I eat that and I go for a run. And I get back to my apartment, and I shower up, and I go to either run a group or meet with a private client. I go straight from there to Base Camp Fitness Santa Monica, where I do circuit training. And I've been a member there for almost 2 years, and I love it because what the gym allows me to do is to show up and do the next hardest thing. It allows me to be comfortable being uncomfortable, which is my recovery. And that's why I love running so much, because I'm purposely putting myself in a long period of being uncomfortable. And I have to know that, all right, if I'm going to go out and run for 2 hours, no matter what comes up, I have to be comfortable doing it. And I have to, I'm not going to stop until that 2 hour mark hits. And it's an act of meditation because you are present in the moment. I'm aware that every step is purposeful. I'm connected to the breath because I want to make sure that my breathing stays on point because I'm trying to keep pace. And I open my awareness to the environment around me. And it's very much a meditative practice for me. And I come home from base camp and I batch cook baked sweet potatoes every 3 days so that I have a lot in my fridge. It's really easy. I'll dust them with cinnamon. I have some steamed greens on the side. I have some fruit. I probably eat about 2 pounds of fruit a day. And then I go to work for the afternoon and I come back and I basically do the same thing for dinner. And look, I'm a person who can do the same thing every day and have it never get boring. And I realize some people aren't like that. But, when I do go out to eat at a restaurant, look, I'm oil-free. I'm an oil-free vegan. And I make it a point to I never have to allow myself to say, just because I'm in a restaurant, I'm not going to live this way. Or just because I'm out with friends, I don't have to eat oil because I don't want to make them uncomfortable. I'm never going to sacrifice my health to make someone else comfortable. So when I go to a restaurant, if it's a steakhouse, believe me, I'm that guy who says, all right, here's what I'm having. I'm having the baked potato and I don't want any oil, any butter. And I'm serious, no oil, no butter. I want this side, I want this side, I want this side, and price it however you want. And when I go to, a friend's house for a party or for a holiday, I bring my own food and I bring enough for everybody. And I say, I made this. This is for everyone. If anyone else wants to try it, that's great. This is what I'm going to have. And I don't tell them what it is. I just say I brought food. And, the great thing is that some people will realize that it's vegan and never try it, which means more for me. So, it works out great. And, that's my daily practice. And I'm not saying that I don't have bad days. I don't have tough days. I don't have days where, I think about what if I had found this out when I was in high school, where I don't, what we call past trip, where I don't resent the fact that it took me 30 years to figure this out. And there aren't days where I look at myself and say, what kind of future do I actually have? I'm a college dropout drug addict who blew everything that he had on drugs. And I realized that doesn't get me anywhere because what's on paper does not represent your inherent value as a person. And I believe that I have created a lifestyle that can be very valuable to myself and to other people. And it's been an amazing ride, and I've got to do some amazing things. Earlier this year, I was with a team that ran from Los Angeles to Washington, D.C. to benefit mental health. And it was called the Icebreaker Run. And we partnered with Mental Health America. And what was amazing was, since it was all endurance athletes, coincidentally, all of us were vegan. Go figure.
Is that so? Just
Yeah.
a lot of the endurance athlete world has become vegan because they realize the performance
Yeah.
benefits they get from it, right?
Performance benefits, the recovery time is just so much better. The lack of inflammation, all this that you get from being vegan and being plant-based is just, it's too good to pass up.
Absolutely. There's a lot of
Not only that, we're finding that a lot of addicts switch to endurance sports because it is a very addictive thing, and it's something that we get to put ourselves through this struggle every single day. So that's something else that I'm really interested in. And I'm training to do my first 100-miler next year. So.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. So suppose I came over to your house and I went to McDonald's beforehand and I took a quarter pounder with cheese and I put it right in front of you and I just saw what you would do. What would happen?
I'd say, are you going to eat that, or we can throw it out?
Got it. So in your head, it doesn't even register as food to you. You look at it and you're like, that's not, Adam wouldn't.
You know what? I think that people talk about, the standard American diet, and they say, how can I compare it to drug addiction? And I'll tell you why. I think that the standard American diet is the deadliest substance abuse on the planet. It is a substance that is addictive, destructive, creates disease in the body, and ultimately, the majority of the time ends up being fatal to those who follow it. And unlike illegal drugs, this is a drug that is socially encouraged. Everybody and everything about the country that you live in and the culture that you live in wants you to use it and tells you that you're weird and strange if you don't. And it has resulted in more deaths per year than any illegal drug on the planet. And it is everywhere, and everyone says you need to do it. Every sports athlete, ad is saying eat meat to get strong. Your doctor is telling you make sure you eat your protein. And they use the term protein instead of actually saying eat this, eat that, because they don't even understand that what they're saying is eat food, because all food has protein in it. And it's destructive, and it's in my opinion, it's the most deadly substance on the planet. So I don't see any distinction between drug recovery and food recovery. I think that when we talk about addiction, all of it goes together, because we're talking about substance abuse, whether we're talking about sex, gambling, food, drugs, it doesn't matter. It's all a symptom of an underlying issue. And that issue is a biological problem that we've created to where we find ourselves in this pleasure trap where we can't help ourselves but do the wrong thing.
It's brilliant. Okay. So what advice would you give to somebody who may have been diagnosed with, let's say, prediabetes or type 2 diabetes, and subconsciously they may recognize that they do have a food addiction?
Yeah.
But they, just like you, they haven't verbalized it to anyone else. They haven't verbalized it to themselves in the mirror. It's all internal.
Yeah.
Okay. So they walk up to you and you recognize this within them. What advice do you give to them?
Well, I would say, look, the result of prediabetes and type 2 diabetes is a result of the foods that we put into our body. And the fact that you can't stop yourself from wanting to eat these foods has nothing to do with your moral fiber, has nothing to do with your character, and nothing to do with who you are as a person. It is simply behavior. And that behavior is driven by motivations that are created by your genes. And the environment that you live in creates that motivation. It doesn't allow you to escape it. All we have to do is change your environment, and you have nothing but chances for success. And it's going to be difficult. It's going to be hard. And a lot of people, I know that for myself in the beginning, I didn't have the tools to self-soothe myself emotionally. And so I had a good friend who said, when you get angry, if you need someone to be angry at, if you need the universe to be angry at, if you want to yell at someone, just yell at me, because I know you're not really yelling at me. And the first, month, 3-4 days a week, a few times a day, I would, pull him aside and just let him have it, because I just needed someone other than myself to be the target of anger for that day. And I think that that's an amazing gift that person gave to me. And I think that that's why a lot of times it's great to work with a counselor in terms of emotional recovery, because we can't recover physically without recovering emotionally at the same time. Because like I said, the substance abuse is a symptom of an underlying emotional issue. And lifestyle change is difficult. It's the hardest thing I've ever done, but it's the most rewarding thing I've ever done. But I think the most important thing is the environment. As long as the environment that you live in is sick, it doesn't matter how much medicine, how many chemicals you throw on top of yourself and put into yourself. If you're in a sick environment, you will always be sick, because everything that we are, we draw from the environment. That's how it works. If you live in a sick environment, you're going to be sick. It's like if a flower can't grow, you don't try and fix the flower, you fix the soil. You fix the soil and then the plant will grow. That's how it works. You fix the environment and only remarkable change can happen.
So when you're talking about fixing the environment, what are you talking about? You're saying change the people you hang out with, the foods that are in your cupboard, the grocery stores that you shop at? Like, give an idea of what does it mean when you say change?
So I recognize that a lot of my success has to do with the fact that I didn't go home to Austin, Texas after I was in rehab.
Right.
In Austin, all these places that I went to were triggers for using. I would drive by a street corner and know that around the corner I used to buy drugs there, and that would trigger a dopamine response driving me to want to buy drugs. I would see my apartment, drive by my apartment and just be triggered by feelings of depression and low self-worth. Whereas in LA, when I moved to Santa Monica, everything was new. And that's where I started my recovery. So when I would walk around Santa Monica and see street corners or, things that stood out, the only connection that I would have to them were moments of self-change and positive growth. So my environment in terms of my, visual triggers were about positive change. The environment in terms of food, which is is probably the part of the environment that impacts us the most, I changed to 100% plant-based. Meaning that the things from the environment that I put into my body only allowed for positive change, only triggered positive growth. And then the people that I surrounded myself with were people who were there for me, that were my counselors, my other people that were in recovery, that we were all trying to achieve the same goal and we were all going through the same emotional struggle. And so people that I interacted with, seeing their faces, hearing the way that they would talk, triggered thoughts of self-growth and recovery. So the environment that I was able to create was only about self-improvement and positive change. And I know I'm very fortunate in that my situation isn't everyone else's, that not everyone can reach out to their family members and say, I need help. But at the end of the day, what it comes down to is what you can do for yourself. And I realized that without plant-based nutrition and a plant-based lifestyle, I can't say for sure I might be sober today. I don't know 100%, but I can tell you one thing: I'd be very sick without it, and I certainly wouldn't be happy, and I certainly wouldn't be healthy. So that's what I mean by environment.
It's fantastic. Like I said earlier, I feel like I could talk to you, Robbie and I could talk to you for hours about this, this dietary transformation and the mental shift that you've had to make over the course of, multiple years in overcoming diabetes, high cholesterol, hypertension. The thing is, we got to end this interview right now just to keep things from going too long. But I wanted to thank you very much for, laying out your story in grave detail. I hadn't even actually heard that story start to finish until right now. So this is just unbelievable.
Well, I appreciate you guys. You know how much it means to me for you guys to ask me to be a part of this. And, I look up to you and to Robbie as, peers and people that I see what you guys have been able to do with your situation. Both of you have taken something that most people would say is a bad situation, type 1 diabetes. And you've completely turned it into something that's going to heal the world. And I wholeheartedly believe that people who have type 1 diabetes have no idea what kind of life they can truly live if they adopt a plant-based diet and follow the teachings that you guys, offer the world. And so it means so much to me to be asked to be a part of this. So thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you. I mean, you have so many good sound bites, the standard American diet is the deadliest drug on the planet, and that it's socially acceptable. And then, weight loss happens in the kitchen. There's just so many beautiful sort of phrases that you've come up with. And, the more that people can learn these sort of small statements and then reiterate it to themselves over and over again, that's how positive change is created.
Yeah. And remember my opinion, recovery is one thing. It's being comfortable with being uncomfortable. That's what it is.